Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris, and this is my video discussion post for week 5. For this week's discussion post, I chose to research African American culture. According to our book, Hayes and Erford 2018, there are several issues that have impacted African Americans. Slavery, or the dehumanization of being considered the legal property of white people in America, had and still impacts the mental health of many African Americans. From the middle of the 18th century through the beginning of the 20th century, pseudoscientists played an integral role in perpetrating the myth that indigenous non-whites were racially inferior. This influenced the American standard that the darker one's skin, the closer one was to an animal, and the further an individual was from the European standard or God's image, so the lower their economic status. This is known as colorism. It still exists within the Black community. This is the assumption where people of color with lighter skin have a perceived easier time than people who are darker skinned. This can negatively impact African American self-esteem and create body image issues. Furthermore, from the late 19th century through the 1960s, Jim Crow laws maintained and supported segregationist policies against people of color in America, which also continues to impact the mental health of African Americans. Therefore, throughout their history in the United States, African Americans have been made to feel unwelcome and as problem people, and unfortunately continue to experience racism and discrimination today. The recurring assumption that most African Americans are poor plagues their culture. The media's portrayal of news stories, movies, and TV programs often supports this perception. It is true that the poverty rates for African Americans remains nearly 2 times higher than that of white Americans due to difficulties with employment. This is often due to lack of education and the standard of living in poorer neighborhoods where there are teacher shortages, lack of resources, inadequate facilities, limited after-school activities, overcrowding, and excessive violence. However, it is also true that many African Americans are not poor. African Americans are 5 times more likely to be incarcerated than people who are white. This may be due to discrimination stemming from slavery and inequality in early America, mandatory sentences for all crimes, and a bond system that favors family ties and access to wealth. Also, the 1994 crime bill incentivized states and localities to increase the number and length of prison sentences while reducing the possibility of early release for those incarcerated. This disproportionately impacted people of color. However, in the last decade, the overall incarceration rate of African Americans has declined 23%. Despite this, there is still racial profiling and the stigma that Blacks are an undesirable group of people to be feared. Many African Americans are distrustful of medical and mental health professionals because of previous experiences with implicit or explicit bias, mistreatment, prejudice, and stereotyping by healthcare providers. According to Haskins et al. 2023, in light of the marginalization, discrimination, and overt racism that Black communities continue to experience, African Americans have increasingly sought mental health services within the last decade. Most theoretical approaches used in counseling were not developed to meet the specific mental health needs of Black clients. Currently, more multicultural approaches like narrative theory have begun to help clients address some forms of oppression by deconstructing their experiences. However, currently, counseling theories also fall short in addressing the unique cultural experiences of many religious African American clients. Therefore, Haskins et al. Recommends combining narrative theory with Black liberation theology, or BLT. This is an anti-racist theory used to help counselors understand African American experiences, cultural narratives, oppression, and liberation mechanisms. There is often a link between an African American individual's mental health and psychological well-being and their connection to religious, spiritual institutions. Religion and/or spirituality offer a source of social support, community, hope, strength, peace, motivation, and clarity during times of distress and doubt. Often belonging to predominantly Black churches has helped African Americans navigate racism, poverty, high crime neighborhoods, and inadequate school-based support. Church leaders and members often offer guidance, coping skills, encouragement, and resources. In narrative therapy, the counselor empowers the client to be the expert in their own story and collaborates with them. The individual gives their experiences meaning, and the counselor acknowledges that societal oppression and power dynamics can impact these meanings. In narrative therapy, the problem is the problem, and the problem does not define the person. The counselor helps the client separate themselves from the problem. The client is encouraged to identify actions, motivations, and beliefs that contradict their current personal life narrative and provide a different outcome or a preferred alternative story. Therefore, the counselor helps the client develop meaning about themselves and create a new narrative. This process further helps the counselor understand more about the client's values and belief system, intentions, expectations, and motivations. Narrative therapy has been effective with Black children, women, and men to address various needs that arise, like citizenship, sexual violence, meaning making, race-related trauma, post-traumatic stress. Narrative therapy dismantles oppression while also accepting the impact these narratives have on the lives of African Americans. Therefore, integrating BLT with narrative therapy approaches can help African Americans articulate the need for connection and empowerment through the dismantling of oppressive historical, spiritual, and social contexts. Clients can then change the narrative to counter the powerlessness and marginalization they may feel. Furthermore, they can examine biblical interpretations that have been used to shape their perspectives and actions as Black people in the United States. The goals are to help African American clients examine the debilitating narratives that have hindered their experiences, explore their personal dialogue, and validate their self and develop a narrative that is not hindered by oppression. This allows Black clients to take a central role and ownership of their experiences and life journey. One major issue or cultural barrier that may exist is trust in the therapeutic relationship. The African American may not believe that a person who is white would or could truly understand their perspective of how they are treated and discriminated against in society. The best way to mitigate this is to have an open conversation with the person, making no assumptions and limiting personal biases towards them, letting them know of any bias I may have, and asking for clarification on what is important to them, what they value, practice, their expectations for counseling, their concerns, any racial disparities they may perceive, and anything else they feel that may prohibit their success in counseling. It is important to listen to their concerns, like fears of being taken advantage of with potentially having a limited education, stigma they may have related to mental health, or fear of being locked up. It is important that clients are aware of just how counseling works and how it will work to specifically address their needs when going over confidentiality and informed consent. They may experience a toll on their whole person from their experiences mentally, emotionally, socially, traumatically, spiritually, and physically. To mitigate this, it is important to actively listen and understand the client's perspective, what they are going through, what they have gone through, and how everything is influencing their emotional health. It is important not to pry out of curiosity, but only identify and ask questions relating to what is impacting their mental health and concerns in regards to treatment. Further, there is diversity and differing cultures within the Black community. Not all Black individuals wish to be called African American or Black. Therefore, we need to ask what they prefer to be called. Also, we need to be aware of both historical and contemporary barriers that affect them and how their experiences may be different from other African Americans depending on their specific culture and heritage. Lastly, people who are African American often value collectivism and their culture. They may focus on their family or collective and not their issues or dilemmas in an individualistic way like we are used to in Western culture. To mitigate this, it is important to understand their perspective, what they value, and adapt treatment to what will best meet their needs. For example, it is important to not use individualistic approaches when the person values a collective approach. It needs to be their choice to enter the counseling relationship once they have all the information. I will help them understand that they have the lead and it is a collaboration. I am not an authoritative figure. It is important that I do what I can to develop a strong therapeutic relationship and be culturally sensitive and appropriate in the treatment plan catered to their specific wants and needs. This way, they find counseling beneficial and successful. Thank you for listening to my discussion post this week. I hope you have a great rest of your week.